Good evening. Whilst I was away in America, of course, we had a big set of elections that took place last Thursday. Quite why it takes until Saturday night to count them all, I have absolutely no idea. What is the upshot of it all? Well, the Conservatives did pretty much as badly as expected, down by nearly 500 council seats, which was pretty much what was expected. They lost nearly 50% of the seats that they held prior to the election. Why? Well, in the seats where Reform stood, a significant number are going to Reform, and we certainly saw that in the Blackpool South by-election, with Reform coming just 117 votes behind the Conservatives, albeit with Labour way out in front. There are also Conservatives going back to Labour. These are the old red wall voters, Brexiteer red wall voters going back to the Labour Party, but also a lot of Conservatives simply staying at home. They're pretty disgusted with the last 14 years. For Labour, on the face of it, well, they won nearly all of the mayoral races, bar one. Ben Houchen managed to hang on up in Teesside, albeit with a vote share that was down by 20%. And they'll certainly be pleased to have won the West Midlands from the Conservatives' Andy Street. So a good night for Labour, but not exactly overwhelming. Didn't exactly feel like Tony Blair in 1997. As for Reform, well, they only stood in 15% of seats. I think what they did prove is they don't have much of a machine on the ground, but that the polls are right. Because across the 300 seats in which they stood, they averaged 12%, with, as I say, nearly 17% in Blackpool South. So there is a Reform vote there. Of that, there's no doubt. But to me, the really big feature, well, I've been talking about it for months on this show, the growth of sectarian politics. I said to all of you that George Galloway's win in that Rochdale by-election was not a one-off. Let's have a look at some of the scenes that we witnessed last Thursday night into Friday.
Raise the voice of Palestine! Allahu Akbar!
I'm going to tell you something here. This is a clear message to Starmer. Bradford has rejected Labour. It's rejected Zionism. And this is a message to you, Nash Shah and Imran Hussain. We are coming for you in the general election. Anyone that stands with Zionism, we're coming after you. Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Well, anyone that supports Zionism, they are coming to get. I hope that just means in electoral terms, although I'm not, given the tone of that gentleman's manner, entirely sure. And let's see some of the scenes of celebration. And this is what you see everywhere. You know, there were about 40 council seats won by people standing on a Gaza agenda. Some stood for the Green Party, some stood for Galloway, some stood as independents. And this all took place in areas that are Muslim majority wards. If that's not a sectarian vote, I don't know what is. How many women can you see in that picture? Absolutely none. And we now go to Burnley and just watch this in Burnley, please. Well, what can you say? This is our country in 2024. This is the diversity agenda. Is this what you intended, Peter Mandelson? You said you wanted to open up, you wanted to change the country. Well, you did it with mass immigration. But don't think the Tories get off on this one. Do you know, in 2023, 250,000 people settled in this country from the Indian subcontinent. And what you can see is that if people come in very, very large numbers, they bring their culture with them. And what we're witnessing with this growth of sectarian politics is an attempt to take over councils, is an attempt to win seats in the British Parliament. And over the last couple of days, the organisation called Muslim Vote, that we've highlighted here on this show before, have put out 18 demands to Keir Starmer. Things such as he must ensure that Sharia-compliant pensions are available at every workplace. It's a list of 18 demands, and you know what? If Keir Starmer met those 18 demands, they'd come back with 18 more. So my question tonight, is sectarian politics here to stay? I believe that it is. I believe that by the time of the 2029 general election, given the population explosion that is going on within those communities. It will be a significant factor. Ultimately, it will hurt Labour far more than it will hurt the Conservative Party. Love your thoughts, please. Farage at GBNews.com. Well, somebody who's been aware of this issue for quite a number of years is veteran journalist Trevor Kavanagh, associate editor of The Sun newspaper. Trevor, you've written about the problems of integration. You've talked about this many times over the years. It looks like your worst fears are coming true.
I think they've come true, frankly. It's not coming, it's here. And what we've seen in those clips is deeply alarming, ugly, and in fact quite sinister. Because the anger that you alluded to, the fury of these people as they leap up and down in exultation at their victories over what I think is a victory over the democratic process, using and hijacking parties like the Green Party in order to get across the views on Gaza, nothing whatsoever to do with the people who live in Leeds. I think this is just the beginning of the visible side of this. This has been going on for quite a long time in areas which have become Muslim ghettos almost, and Tower Hamlets is one of the ones just down the road from us here in London. But there are many, many more where votes are not actually delivered to the ballot box by the electors, but by the people, the imams, the people who bundle them up in carry bags, as you know.
And this is the abuse of the postal voting system.
Yes, it should be scrapped straight away.
Yeah.
All votes should be in person.
There is an irony here, Trevor. There's not been an election in Gaza for almost 20 years, and yet here we are in English local elections voting on Gaza. But it's about more than Gaza, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's about the adoption of a whole range of things, from Sharia law, as you say, from Sharia financing, which are in fact alien to the capitalist system that we have here, the democratic system, really, of business being done. But it's also grasping in, putting the feelers out into the areas of power, where the levers of power are. You're now getting overt indications of people seeking to influence events, which, if they're actually using a market gardener in Leeds representing the Green Party to try and manipulate national government policy on foreign affairs, you can only begin to imagine where else they might go.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I'm joined down the line by Mohammed Amin, the former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum.
Good evening,
Mohammed, good evening. Welcome back to the programme. I guess when you see a poll 3 weeks ago that shows that 46% of British Muslims support Hamas, a terrorist organisation, a prescribed organisation, when you look at that, I guess these results in our inner cities are not that surprising.
Well, first of all, you and I met and talked about that poll a few weeks ago, and I think the poll had many deficiencies, but let's not go into that now. As far as what we're seeing this weekend, passions amongst some British Muslims are running understandably high, given what they see happening every day in Gaza. However, what they need to remember is that local councils do not deal in foreign policy. And I think what's been happening in terms of people standing on a Gaza ticket when they're running for the local council is self-defeating, fruitless. I can understand people feeling passionate about it, but frankly, they're wasting their time.
Well, they may be wasting their time, but I think what they're doing is building up a power base so that they can win members of parliament. And they might get one or two this time round. They might get a lot in 2029 if people continue to vote on religious lines. Now, the point I was making a moment ago, Mohammed, is actually the Conservatives are as guilty, if not more guilty, with irresponsible, open-door policies to the subcontinent. And it's that culture we're seeing playing out on our streets.
Well, the people who were arriving in 2023 from the Indian subcontinent are, by and large, highly educated people, because we have very tough visa requirements in terms of what you need to be able to earn to get a visa to immigrate from anywhere in the world now. So I think it's entirely wrong.
No. That's not true. That's not true, is it? Actually, what this government did was lower the bar in terms of what you had to earn. We've promised now to put it back up again. And also, a lot of these numbers are through family reunions, aren't they?
Well, some of them will be through family reunions, but the key point is that with every year that goes by, first of all, the immigrant population generally and Muslims in particular are dispersing around the country. People do not, in general, vote by religious groupings, and I will be astonished if we get even one MP at the next general election who is elected because they're standing on a religious ticket, unless it's George Galloway. I don't expect even George Galloway to hold his seat next time, frankly.
All right, well, I think you may be in denial, but you're confident that the Muslim population will become anglicised and vote on similar issues along similar lines to the existing population. Is that what you're saying?
Everything that we've seen about how Muslims vote for the last 20 years, the issues that they consider important when they actually go to the ballot box, the parties that they vote for, indicates that they, with every year that goes by, they become more and more mainstream political voters.
All right, Mohammed Amin, thank you very much indeed. Folks at home, never let it be said, we don't let you hear both sides of every argument, because we do. Trevor Kavanagh, your column, your Monday column in The Sun, which I have to say I always read, a lot of people do. You were talking today about these two academics, Rallings and Thrasher, very well-respected people, and they do full analyses of upcoming elections and results, and they do it jolly well. They have extrapolated the local election results out into a general election score, suggesting that the gap between Labour and the Conservatives is narrower than the 20 points that the opinion polls nationally have been suggesting. Sky News have been running banner headlines today. It could be a hung parliament. Rishi Sunak saying much the same thing. You seemed in your column today to agree with that analysis, or was it just wishful thinking on your part?
Probably a bit of wishful thinking, but I'm no clearer about what's going to happen in 6 or 7 months' time than you are.
Sure.
But this is not just Rallings and Thrasher. I've had a number of very recent conversations over lunch with former senior Blairite cabinet ministers, very seasoned veteran performers, battle-scarred as well. They've been through elections that they expected to win and failed to. And they say exactly the same thing. And this was long before the local elections, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they were saying this is going to be much, much closer. It's much more like 1964 than it is 1979, when Wilson, who was expected to win by a landslide,
won by a handful,
won by 4 votes, 4 seats. So, look, anything is possible. But I do think the key to this is that nobody is voting for Labour. They're voting against the Tories in huge numbers. There's no appetite for Starmer. There's no manifesto from Starmer. We don't know what he stands for, but whenever he stands for something, he immediately does a U-turn. And watch this space on Gaza. If they're at risk of losing seats, as they are, this principled stand in favour of Israel, watch that gradually dissolve.
It's funny you say that, because he has put a statement out in the last few hours, and we'll be putting that to a Labour commentator in just a moment. As you say, a week's a long time in politics, let alone 6 or 7 months. But the Conservatives do need to win back trust, don't they?
Yes, and that's going to be very, very difficult. The trust has been shattered, and that explains everything about last week.
And stay at home and everything else.
And it almost doesn't matter what Rishi does, because that trust is so difficult to restore.
Yeah, it will be very hard. Well, and we've also got John Curtis coming on later, who thinks there's a 99% chance that Keir Starmer will be in number 10. Trevor Kavanagh, great to have you on.